It's great to be with you all this morning. Anything is possible in philanthropy if we take risks, dream big, and set aside our egos to truly work collaboratively. Let me say that again. Anything is possible if we dream big, take risks, and work collaboratively. That's ridiculous, some of you might be saying. The best we can hope for is to fund some effective programs and improve as many lives as possible. Philanthropic dollars are just a drop in the bucket. Well, that kind of small ball thinking is horsepucky, and we have to abandon it if we want to truly transform our nation and the world. There is an urgent need right now in 2017 for foundations and high net worth donors to invest heavily in advocacy and community organizing and transformative social movements. That's how we're going to move our nation forward. So think back with me about 20 years ago to 1997. Gas was $1.22 a gallon. Arnie Carlson was the governor here. The Lion King debuted on Broadway. And everyone's favorite band, the Spice Girls, had a song at the top of the charts. Now, did anyone in this room think in 1997 that in less than 20 years, marriage equality would be the law of the land? It didn't seem even remotely possible. Full marriage equality for same-sex couples seemed to be very, very far off. In the year 2000, the Evelyn and Walter Haas Jr. Fund started thinking about what their foundation could do to advance rights and dignity for gay people. This is a California-based funder. And then the next year, they made a $2.5 million investment in the Freedom to Marry campaign. And that was the largest investment at that time by a foundation in the gay rights movement at all. And then 2 years later, they realized we can't possibly do this alone. This is going to be a long, long fight. And they helped form a funder collaborative, the Civil Marriage Collaborative. And they worked with all these great funders over a period of years. Not a lot of funders, right? That's a small number. But what they accomplished over a dozen years was simply incredible. They worked in deep partnership with each other, in deep partnership with their grantees. It wasn't always easy. Every time they had a victory, it seemed they had another setback that they had to deal with. There were ups and downs, but they stuck with it. Perseverance. They stuck with the funders together. They stuck by their grantee partners, and they really just kept their eyes on the prize. And then eventually the state level wins started to pile up. And then on June 26, 2015, we all know what happened. The Supreme Court ruled and marriage equality became the law of the land. And everyone involved in that campaign, the movement organizations, the funders, everyone agrees that philanthropy and those funders in that collaborative played a critical role in this campaign. It was a great day for our country, and showed that foundations and nonprofits working together were able to make our nation a little bit more fair and a little more just. And I'm sure everyone in this room has a personal story about how this ruling has impacted your life. For me, I got to attend the wedding of my sister a year and a half ago right here in Minnesota. So another piece of good news, these kinds of philanthropic strategies not only work well on a national campaign, they work on state and local level campaigns. So let me tell you quickly about a campaign in California. A group of funders formed the California Civic Participation Funders Group to increase civic participation with communities of color and among other underrepresented folks in California. Now, these funders are not civic participation funders. Some of them are environmental funders or health funders, or they care about immigrant rights or women's rights. But they realized that in order for any one of their issues to make progress, they needed to boost civic participation among communities of color and other underrepresented groups. And they banded together in 2010 to do that. And they worked together over a period of years, funding in 4 counties in California. And last summer, in one of those counties, in San Diego, the citizens passed an earned sick leave and minimum wage ordinance. And it immediately increased the minimum wage in San Diego to $10.50 an hour. And then it went up again a couple of weeks ago on January 1st to $11.50 an hour. And we've got thousands and thousands of families benefiting. And yet, San Diego isn't really known as a bastion for progressivism and progressive policies. But with years of sustained civic participation funding by these funders, a new reality became possible. And I think we're all better off because of that. So I've been studying this stuff for the last 10 years since I came to NCRP. And I just want to share with you 6 things that I think funders can do to maximize impact. And the first thing that we need to do is to invest heavily in community organizing, advocacy, and civic engagement. That's where the leverage is in philanthropy. Rigorous research shows that for every dollar we invest in those strategies, communities and families get $115 back in return. And if you want to challenge yourselves around this, think about the Public Welfare Foundation in Washington, D.C. Every year on our lists, they devote at least 75% of their grant dollars to these high leverage strategies. Could you get your numbers up to 75%? It'd be something to strive for. Another thing to keep in mind is to use targeted strategies even when you have universal goals. If you want to help everyone in your community, you're going to need a different approach to reach the Latino community than you might use with whites or African Americans. You might have differentiated strategies to try to help women or men. The Lumina Foundation does this very well in Indianapolis. They have a universal goal of increasing college attainment rates in the United States, but they have a grant-making strategy that's targeted for each different population group. The next thing that's critical is to provide multi-year general operating support. It builds trust between the funders and the grantees, and it contributes directly to the effectiveness and the impact of the nonprofits. The truth is that serious social change will never happen on a 1-year grant cycle. You've got to give the grantees long-term, unrestricted support so they can adapt. Fourth thing to keep in mind is to work together, to collaborate. This is critical, not only funders working together, but incentivizing your grantees to collaborate together as well. None of us, not even the Gates Foundation, has enough money to tackle any of these problems on our own. And so we need to work together if we want to make a serious difference. The next point I want to make is about investing in leadership, grassroots leadership of the affected communities that you're trying to help. There are lasting benefits from funding that kind of leadership engagement from affected communities. And if we don't do it, burnout of movement leaders can really cripple a campaign. Now, if you're looking for an effective example on how to fund leadership well, look to the Levi Strauss Foundation in San Francisco. They have a terrific social justice leadership program that they do there. So my last point is that we need to realize that racism and sexism are still huge problems in our society. I think the presidential election campaign showed that really clearly. And as funders, we need to recognize that fact and we need to fund equity. We need to realize that we have a long way to go and we've got to build racial equity and gender equity into our grant-making programs. So I want to close by saying we don't have any time to waste. I mean, inauguration of this guy is happening tomorrow. There's a lot to do. Big change is possible. Philanthropy can and must be part of the solution. We just need to dream big, take risks, and work collaboratively. Thank you. Now the Q&A. Yeah.